In the records of the soul and of the earth I beheld a vision, a memory not bound to one age but written into the very fabric of creation. I saw a people who rose in splendor, who charted the stars as one would trace the lines of a familiar face, who bent stone and light to their will. They moved as a single body across the continents, their cities alive with order and their temples attuned to the heavens, yet within them was sown the seed of pride, and pride brought blindness, and blindness brought ruin. For no nation can stand when it forgets the law of one. I watched as signs gathered in the skies, fire trailing across the darkness, the waters beneath rising with hunger. In less than a span of days, the power of ages was swallowed, mountains crumbled, seas swept over fertile fields, and the light of a great people was extinguished. Yet not all were lost, for in every ending there is a remnant, and this remnant, shaken but not destroyed, set their hands to the work of remembrance. They cut from the rock circles of stone pillars bearing the images of creatures of earth and symbols of the stars, and they buried these in the belly of the hill, not as monuments to kings or gods, but as a message to those who would come long after. It was a warning carved in silence, telling the children of the future that what had happened once would surely return. In the vision I felt their anguish. I heard their plea that some might survive the cycles to come. For the earth does not forget, the stars do not forget, only man forgets. And so man must be reminded, the wisdom of these ancients was not born of chance, but of long ages. Their fall was not from ignorance, but from misuse. For when knowledge is severed from reverence, it becomes the instrument of judgment. What they sought to pass on was not only the memory of fire and flood, but also the covenant of unity, the law of one that sustains beyond time. I tell you plainly, the stones sleep now under the soil of the East, but they were placed there for the sons and daughters of this age, so that when they rise again into the light of day, the voice of the past will speak. It will say, beware, for the sky is not empty, the sea is not still, and the cycle of ages is not broken. In that day many will scoff, saying these are but myths and imaginings, yet the heart will know, for truth leaves an imprint deeper than denial. Remember that what is written in the heavens is written also in the soul, as above so below, and the pillars beneath the hill are mirrors of the constellations above. The dog star, the scorpion, the bear, all testify to the same story, that the world has turned and burned before, and shall do so again. But within the judgment there is mercy, for the warning was left not to terrify, but to awaken. I say unto you, awaken now, seek not the divisions of tribe or tongue, but the unity of spirit, the oneness with the Creator. Only thus will man endure when the heavens shake and the seas roar. I beheld it, I feel it still, and I give it to you not as a tale, but as the record of the soul, that you might choose rightly in the days appointed. Beneath the soil of the eastern hills lie the stones of remembrance, carved not for glory, but for survival, buried not to hide, but to endure. For those who shaped them knew that time is a devourer. They understood that what is built upon the surface is claimed by the wind and the water, but what is hidden within the earth may yet speak across the centuries. These people of the former age had seen the world overturned. They had watched fire streak across the heavens and seas, consume the plains. They knew that their knowledge, their craft, their very memory would vanish if it were left to the mercy of storm and wave. So they dug deep, they raised pillars in circles, and they clothed them again with earth, creating a tomb not for kings, but for wisdom itself. Every line they carved upon the stone bore witness to a truth they wished to preserve. Images of the scorpion, the bird with outstretched wing, the serpent uncoiling from the south. These were not decorations. They were warnings written in the alphabet of the sky. They were calendars set in rock to testify of a day when the heavens would once more rain fire upon the earth. Yet the stones were more than prophecy. They were also a covenant, a reminder that man is not the master of the world, but the steward. They were set down so that future generations might remember the cost of forgetting the law of one, the cost of exalting pride above reverence. Tell me, if you uncovered such a monument today, if you brushed the soil from a pillar that bore testimony to disaster and survival, would you believe it? Would you feel the weight of its message, or would you dismiss it as the work of primitives scratching at rock? Those who buried these circles knew well the frailty of human memory. They foresaw the mockery of future ages, and still they left their testimony, because they trusted that not all would be blind. In their wisdom, they understood that truth must sometimes be hidden to be preserved, as a seed is buried before it bears fruit. So they buried their message in the womb of the hill to be reborn in its appointed time, and in this act they revealed a profound faith. For only those who hope in the future take the trouble to speak across millennia. I say to you, these buried stones are voices calling from an age before the flood. They speak not of temples to false gods, not of dynasties or kings, but of cosmic cycles and the peril of forgetting. They speak of the fire from above and the waters from beneath, and they urge the children of men to be watchful, to be humble, to live in oneness with the source. The warning is plain. The cycle that once brought ruin will turn again. The sky will again be written with fire, and those who have ears to hear must prepare, not with walls of stone or weapons of war, but with the alignment of the soul to the Creator, for only in harmony with the law of one can humanity endure the turning of ages. So I ask you again, when you hear of a circle of stone hidden in the belly of the earth, when you see carved upon its face the testimony of a world that perished, what does your heart tell you? Does it stir with remembrance? Does it fear? Or does it awaken? For the answer you give will shape the days to come, just as surely as the ancients shaped their pillars for you. The stones hidden in the belly of the hill do not merely confront the imagination, they confront the doctrines of those who call themselves guardians of history. For the accepted tale told in the halls of learning is that man emerged slowly from caves and huts, that only a few thousand years ago he learned to plant seed and tame the field, and only then could he gather into cities and shape governments. Yet when the buried circles came to light, this narrative was shaken, for the stones were far older than the kingdoms of Sumer, older even than the first dynasties of Egypt, their carvings more refined than those expected of wandering hunters. The scholars said it could not be. They said such structures must belong to a later age, that the dates must be mistaken, because their theories left no place for a civilization so ancient. But the earth is not bound by theory. The soil yields what it remembers, and the radiance of time engraved in those stones is undeniable. The very alignment of the enclosures to the star that shines brightest in the heavens testifies to intention, to knowledge, to a people who measured their life with the sky. The scholars tried to bend the evidence to say that nomads could gather for ritual and then disperse, but the duration of the site, stretching over 1,000 years, revealed continuity, community, and purpose. This was no chance assembly. This was sustained vision. Yet to admit this would mean rewriting the chronology on which entire careers and institutions have been built. So they hesitated, they resisted, they sought refuge in the claim that absence of proof is proof of absence. They said there was no sign of older knowledge that could have led to such craftsmanship, and therefore the craftsmanship itself must be denied. But here lies the weakness of their reasoning, for the absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. What is hidden beneath sea and soil, what is pulverized by fire and flood, is not gone, only buried. To cling to the tale of late beginnings, while ignoring the witness of stone, is to mistake silence for truth. The debate among scholars thus reveals not only the fragility of knowledge, but also the pride that resists correction. Yet, slowly, as more hills revealed their secrets, as other sites came into view, the resistance softened. They were forced to acknowledge that humanity was building with stone far earlier than their charts allowed, though many still called it anomaly rather than pattern. But in truth, it is pattern, a sign that humanity has risen and fallen in cycles, each time forgetting what was before, each time rediscovering fragments of what was lost, and each time the scholars of the New Age declaring themselves the first. The buried stones unmask this arrogance. They demand humility before the depth of time. They show that the story of man is not a straight ascent from darkness to light, but a circle of ascent and fall, guided by the movements of the heavens. Judged by the use or abuse of knowledge, and warned by the testimony of those who came before, thus the scholars are faced with a choice: to cling to the comfort of their limited charts, or to allow the stones to expand their vision. Whether they yield or not, the stones remain immovable, and in their silence more persuasive than the most elaborate theories. For stone is the handwriting of eternity, and it does not flatter the pride of man. I beheld in the records that the ancients did not set their stones at random, nor did they carve without purpose. Every pillar bore the weight of the sky, every circle faced a star, and the brightest of these was the faithful sentinel we know as the dog star, Sirius, shining more fiercely than any other upon the night of man. In those distant ages it was not merely a light, but a marker, a clock in the heavens. The ancients watched as it rose and shifted over the course of centuries. They marked its path with stone and adjusted their sanctuaries to keep pace with its journey, for they knew that when stars move, the earth and all upon it also change. In this way their monuments were not altars to imagine gods, but instruments to measure the great clockwork of creation. I saw how they understood that the heavens are a book, that every constellation is a letter, and every alignment a sentence. And when read with wisdom, this book tells the story of what was and what shall be. The scorpion drawn upon the pillar was not only the likeness of a creature that creeps upon the earth, it was the Scorpius of the sky, and beside it the vulture, with wings outstretched, bore the orb of the sun, together forming a record of the day when fire fell and waters rose, a reminder that heaven and earth mirror one another. What is written above will sooner or later be written below. The cycles of stars are also the cycles of men. When Sirius moved, the builders set new stones. When constellations shifted, they adjusted their enclosures. Their lives were not divorced from the heavens, but woven into them. Even the span of 1,000 years, in which they raised and rebuilt, was only a moment in the cosmic rhythm they sought to follow. To the modern eye, these carvings seem crude depictions of animals, yet in truth they are a map, not of geography, but of destiny. They mark the alignment of the sun with the scorpion. They mark the entry of the serpent from the south. They mark the turning of the seasons of the world, not the small seasons of harvest and winter, but the vast seasons of ages. When the tilt of the earth and the sweep of the heavens conspire to bring judgment or renewal, the ancients knew that the flood and fire did not come by chance, but by the cycle of stars, by the turning of the great wheel. Therefore they bent their will to remember. They sought to bind knowledge in stone so that their children might know when the cycle would turn again. I tell you plainly, the stars are not distant fires only. They are signs, and their movements are warnings. The ancients did not worship them, but listened to them, for in their courses lay the key to survival. And when the dog star and the scorpion stand as they once stood, when the constellations align as they did in the days of ruin, then know the age has turned again. The builders of the buried hill prepared for that day, not by hiding from it, for none can hide from the sky, but by bearing witness, by leaving a message across the abyss of time, so that those who live in the latter age might remember what the former age endured. And though I speak from the records of spirit, I say to you, the heavens are still speaking. Their language is unchanged. The same stars that judged the ancients now shine upon you. And their message remains that man must live in harmony with the order of creation, or be swept aside when the cycles turn. The vision turned, and I was shown the most haunting of the stones, a pillar upon which the image of a bird spreads its wings and carries the sun, and beneath it the scorpion raises its tail, poised to strike. This is no idle carving of beasts, but the record of a day when heaven and earth shook together. The vulture with the orb upon its wing declares the sun's place in the sky. The scorpion beneath reveals the constellation that held dominion in that hour. It was a message not of ritual, but of catastrophe. A star map set in stone to mark the very season when fire descended from above and waters rose from below. The ancients did not trust parchment that can burn, nor memory that can fade. They trusted only the endurance of rock. Upon this pillar they engraved the memory of the worst day in their history. The bird lifting the sun shows the heavens pierced by light that does not warm, but sears. The scorpion reveals the sting of death, and beneath them other figures appear. The serpent twisting upward, the headless man sprawled in death, all bound together in a tale both celestial and earthly. For the stones tell two stories at once, one of constellations above and one of events upon the earth. The scorpion of the sky corresponds to the fire that rained upon their land. The serpent rising from the south corresponds to the great waves that rolled across their world. The headless man at the base signifies the loss, the sudden and merciless cutting off of life. This pillar is the remembrance of the younger age, the time when ice melted not over millennia but in weeks, when seas surged and swept away the cities of pride. In the records I could feel their terror. I could hear their cries as they carved these images, not as art, but as testimony, not to glorify themselves, but to warn their descendants. The bird, the scorpion, the serpent, the man, each is both symbol and record, each is both heavenly and earthly, and together they form a code meant for those who would one day uncover the buried hill. It says clearly, what was will be, watch the heavens, see when the constellations stand again, as they did in our day, for then the cycle will return. Some would dismiss this as myth, but stone is not myth. It is fact. And when symbols repeat across the earth, when peoples of many lands tell of fire and flood, we are not hearing fancy, we are hearing memory. The Vulture Stone is thus both gravestone and prophecy. It marks the death of a world and the warning of another death to come. It calls the children of later ages not to complacency but to vigilance, to humility before the forces that rule above. In the records I beheld that even the act of burial was part of the message, as though the ancients were saying, we cannot save you from what is written in the stars, but we can give you the knowledge to see it coming. We can give you the witness of our fall, so that you may prepare. The bird and the scorpion carved upon the pillar are therefore more than images. They are voices across 12,000 years, voices of those who saw their world destroyed, pleading that we not repeat their folly. To look upon them is to gaze into a mirror of our own fate. For the heavens are constant, the cycles unbroken, and the sting of the scorpion awaits those who forget the testimony of stone. I beheld the cycle that came before, the age when the world was covered in vast sheets of ice and man had learned to live within its cold embrace. For 2 million years the rhythm was steady, the earth chilled, yet fertile in chosen places, rivers teeming, plains abundant. And in that steadiness men grew wise. They formed societies that remembered the stars. They built their sanctuaries and governed their peoples. But when the wheel of the heavens turned, the balance was broken. First the ice melted slowly, seas rising inch by inch, enough to trouble their settlements, but not enough to destroy them. Then came the great reversal, the abrupt cold that returned like a thief in the night. The ancients endured it for 1,000 years, for they knew how to live with snow and frost. But when warmth returned, it did not creep, it rushed, and the ice vanished not over millennia, but in days. The records show torrents of water carving valleys in hours, whole forests uprooted, herds drowned in an instant, men scattered from their cities as waves swept across plains that had been home for generations. And above all this, the sky was ablaze. For fragments of a broken wanderer, a comet of old, struck the atmosphere and shattered the order of the world. Where ice lay thick, it melted in a fury. Where fire rained down, it scorched the ground. It was not one disaster, but a chain of calamities, shaking land, sea, and air all at once. In this, the civilization of that cycle was undone, not by weakness of knowledge, but by the relentlessness of nature. No wall could hold back the sea, no altar could calm the heavens, no power of man could halt the shaking of the earth. And thus, in less than a week, the achievements of thousands of years lay broken, the memory of their greatness buried beneath silt and ash. Yet, fragments of their life endured. The stories of a flood carried into every tongue, from the mountains of the east to the valleys of the west, from the temples of the Nile to the huts of the islands, all spoke of waters that swept the earth and of fire that fell from the firmament. And though their names for the event differed, the memory was the same, that mankind had once stood higher than believed and was brought low by the turning of the cycle, I tell you plainly, the flood of Noah is but one echo of this greater event, for the deluge is written not only in scripture but in geology, in the stones of the seabed, in the ice of Greenland, in the bones of beasts frozen in mid-steppe. These witnesses do not lie. They tell of a suddenness that defies the theories of men, of a catastrophe swift and merciless, and it is this the ancients sought to preserve in their buried circles. They carved the scorpion and the serpent because they remembered the sting and the waves. They buried their work because they knew the earth would tremble again. So the disaster of the former cycle is not legend but record, not myth but memory, and to dismiss it is to close the eyes to the truth that the earth itself bears, that civilizations are not eternal, that every prideful tower stands only until the heavens decree its fall. The stones declare it, the records confirm it, and the spirit within me testifies that what was before is warning for what is to come. When the waters receded and the fires were spent, the earth was scarred and the people few, tribes wandered in hunger, their memory shattered, their knowledge drowned with the cities that had been their pride. Yet in that desolation came figures remembered in every land, men who were more than men, teachers who rose from the sea. They bore no armies and carried no crowns, but they brought the gift of remembrance. They carried the fragments of the law of one. In Chaldea they were known as Oannes, the being who was half man and half fish. In Egypt they were remembered as Osiris, who came from the waters to teach justice and order. In the highlands of the east they spoke of Manu, saved upon the ark and guided by the divine fish. In the lands of the New World they whispered of Quetzalcoatl, who came clothed in white and gave laws and maize. Though the names differ, the story is one, that after the deluge a teacher from the sea brought the seeds of civilization to those left in darkness. These were the survivors of the former age, men who had seen the fall of their world and carried within them the wisdom of the stars and the craft of stone. They did not claim divinity. Though men later called them gods, they claimed only that knowledge must be given if humanity was to rise again. I beheld how they taught agriculture, where before there was only gathering, how they set down measures and numbers where before there was confusion, how they directed men to build with stone aligned to the constellations, that they might remember the sky and not forget the warning. These teachers spoke of cycles, of the danger that descends when man loses reverence. They told their disciples that fire from heaven had destroyed their fathers, and that it would come again. They urged them to live in harmony with creation, to honor the unity of all souls. But men are quick to forget. In time, the memory of the message faded, and only the glory of the messenger remained. Temples were raised to Oannes, altars built to Osiris, statues carved of Quetzalcoatl. The truth became wrapped in myth, and the warning became hidden in worship. Yet still across the world, the common thread remains. Every culture bears a tale of a being from the sea who gave the first knowledge. Is it chance that these tales echo one another, or is it memory retold in many tongues? The teachers from the sea were the bridge between the old world and the new, the keepers of wisdom who refused to let the fire of the Spirit die in the flood. They gave freely, not to exalt themselves, but to preserve mankind, and their testimony is carved in the stones beneath the hill. For the bird, the scorpion, the serpent are their handwriting across time, a record left, so that when the age turned again, men would know they were not the first to rise, and would not be the last to fall. I say unto you, the teachers from the sea were not phantoms, nor inventions of fancy. They were the remnant of a people greater than the world remembers, carrying the burden of survival, bearing the hope of continuity, and their presence in every legend is proof enough that truth survives even when cities sink. These figures are the witnesses of an age erased, and their voice still whispers to those who have ears, prepare, remember, live not for pride, but for unity. For the sea that once gave the teacher can just as quickly return to reclaim the pupil. I beheld not only a single circle of stones, but a great ring of earth itself, hills rising like sentinels around a hidden center, each mound sheltering chambers and enclosures, each a fragment of a larger design. together forming the outline of a city greater than the memory of men allows. It was not the dwelling of nomads, nor the chance gathering of wanderers, but the deliberate structure of a people who had known order. In the records of the soil there are traces of halls large enough to hold assemblies, granaries where food was stored against famine, and houses fashioned not of frail reeds, but of stone shaped by skilled hands. This was a city of permanence, built upon the bones of the former world, and its builders were the heirs of those who had survived the flood. They gathered where the rivers crossed and the land was fertile. They raised monuments to the sky and carved testimony into pillars, but they also built places for living, for trade, for the teaching of their children. It was a society not in its first dawn, but in its rebuilding, a people relearning the arts of governance and craft. I saw men laboring with stone tools that cut with precision beyond their supposed age, women weaving garments dyed with colors drawn from the earth, children taught to recognize the constellations as one would learn letters. The city was both sanctuary and school, a place where the survivors could root themselves again after the waters withdrew. Yet in the passage of time the earth swallowed it. Hills rose over its courtyards, soil covered its foundations, and the memory of its people faded into legend. Some would call it a metropolis of the ancients, others a holy precinct. But to the spirit it appears as both. For in those broad avenues and gathering halls I saw not only the exchange of goods, but the exchange of wisdom. This was a culture that bound heaven and earth, that measured its seasons by Sirius and marked its destiny by Scorpius, and when they laid out their settlements, they mirrored the constellations above, creating upon the ground a reflection of the stars. Such harmony is never the work of accident. It is the mark of intention and of remembrance. They knew they were living upon the threshold of cycles. They knew their days were borrowed from the mercy of the heavens, and so they built as if each stone might serve as message to the unborn. Now in the present age, fragments of these places rise again, walls unearthed beneath the spade, carvings glimpsed beneath collapsed roofs, stairways leading into chambers long sealed. Every discovery whispers that the city was no dream, that it existed and thrived while the world beyond was still broken. The scholars will debate its function, some saying it was temple, others market, others fortress, but the truth is larger than any single name. It was the heart of a people seeking to bind their survival to the eternal, for in their streets lay the rhythm of trade, in their stones the testimony of faith, and in their hills the geometry of the stars. Though earth has hidden it, though time has sought to erase it, the city speaks still, and it speaks of a humanity that had risen again after ruin, only to be forgotten until the soil gave it back. This is the city of the lost ring, the metropolis that once stood as proof that man does not begin in darkness, but begins again after each darkness, and its testimony waits for those willing to read it in stone and in spirit. I beheld in the records that even as the earth yields its secrets, there are those who labor to cover them again, not with soil and stone, but with denial and deception, for knowledge that overturns the foundations of accepted history is seldom welcomed by the keepers of that history, and the stones of the buried hills cry out against the tales written in the halls of scholarship. I saw men of learning confronted with evidence too ancient, too advanced, yet rather than bow before truth, they twisted their tongues to explain it away. They called it anomaly. They said the dates were mistaken. They claimed that what was found must be ritual and not civilization, for to admit otherwise would unravel their charts and the authority they guard. I tell you plainly, the pride of knowledge can be as blinding as the ignorance of folly, for when truth threatens reputation, many choose to protect reputation, and when discovery demands humility, many clothe themselves instead in scorn. These are the keepers of fragments who fear the whole, who cling to their scrolls, while the stones proclaim a greater testimony. I beheld how institutions built upon theories resisted the voice of the earth itself, how they mocked those who spoke of civilizations before the flood, how they silenced voices that suggested man has risen and fallen in cycles. Yet truth is not bound by decree. The carved pillars remain, though their interpreters falter. The alignments to the stars do not change, though the scholars deny them. The city beneath the hills exists, whether or not the textbooks acknowledge it. Still, the guardians of narrow knowledge conceal. They bury inconvenient discoveries in archives. They dismiss them with ridicule. They starve them of support. But in doing so, they betray not only the living, but the dead whose memory is held in the stones. I saw that fear is their true master. Fear that if man learns he has lived in greatness before, then he will no longer accept the authority of those who teach only the littleness of his past. Fear that if the cycles are admitted, then the fragility of the present age will be revealed. For if civilizations have perished before they can perish again, and that thought the rulers of knowledge cannot allow, so they weave veils, they speak with certainty where they should speak with awe, they claim final answers where there are only beginnings. Yet time itself is their undoing. For each year more of the earth opens, each season another fragment arises, and their fortress of denial is eroded stone by stone. Still, I must tell you this, that concealment is not only the act of scholars, it is also the act of the soul. For man resists truth that demands change, just as institutions resist discoveries that demand revision. In this, the keepers of knowledge and the common heart are alike, preferring the comfort of falsehood to the burden of awareness. But the records cry out that the burden must be borne, for what is hidden will be revealed, and what is denied will rise. The guardians of narrow truth may continue their concealment, but the hills will continue to speak, and the voice of the stones will outlast the voices of men. I beheld this, and I knew that no matter how long knowledge is hidden, it is not lost, for the earth herself is witness, and she cannot be silenced. I beheld in the records that the buried stones of the eastern hills are not alone in their testimony, for across the earth other voices rise from soil and sea to proclaim the same story. In the lands of the west there are caves where bones of beasts and tools of man lie far older than the scholars once allowed. In the valleys of the north there are marks in stone that speak of hunters and builders tens of thousands of years before their time. In the deserts of the south there are roads laid in white plaster stretching like veins between forgotten cities. And these roads predate the empires that men celebrate in their books. The jungle of the New World has yielded walls and pyramids veiled by vines, yet built with such precision that even the nations of Europe could not rival them until long after. And still deeper in the forest, more cities wait, connected by highways and aqueducts, their stones proclaiming that there was once an order and a knowledge that no accident could have produced. In the isles of the Pacific, there are tongues that share words with those of the far west, though oceans divide them, as if a memory of one people scattered by waters remained in their speech. Beneath the waters off the coasts of India lie structures fitted with the same care as temples, stairs descending into the sea, where once they rose to meet the sky. In the cold caves of the far north, cut deep in permafrost, are the signs of human hands far earlier than any chart of history permits. All these fragments speak as one, declaring that humanity walked the earth long before the accepted dawn, and that they built, traded, sailed, and studied the stars. The flood came and covered them. The fires fell and destroyed their works. Yet the evidence cannot be erased. Though it lies buried or drowned, it waits for the appointed time to rise. I saw that every culture remembers the deluge, from the tablets of Mesopotamia to the chants of the islanders, from the pyramids of the Nile to the sacred stories of the Andes. All carry the imprint of water and fire, and all speak of teachers who came after to restore what was lost. The scholars will say these are coincidences, that myths arise from common fears. But stone does not lie. Roads do not pave themselves. Languages do not invent the same words upon distant shores. By chance, these are not scattered curiosities, but woven threads of one greater tapestry, a record of a world that was once united in knowledge and then torn apart by judgment. I beheld that man has always sought to deny the breadth of his own past. Yet the earth will not allow the lie to endure, for every time the story is buried, it is unearthed again, whether in the jungle, the desert, the sea, or the ice, and each discovery is a voice added to the chorus, proclaiming that what was believed to be the beginning is only a beginning again. The testimony of these places is not meant to glorify the ancients, but to warn the present. to remind us that the earth is older, the cycles longer, and the judgments more certain than we would wish. The evidence is everywhere, on every continent, in every tongue, and to close our eyes to it is to walk willingly into the same fate that overtook them. For the stones of one land may be doubted, but the stones of the whole world together cannot be denied. I beheld in the records that the deepest warning given by the ancients was not of famine or war or the rise and fall of kings, but of fire from the sky, for they knew that empires may crumble by the hand of man, yet civilizations are ended by the decree of heaven. The buried stones speak of a time when the constellations themselves mark the hour of judgment, the scorpion rising, the serpent twisting upward, the sun born on the wings of the vulture, each figure proclaiming that the heavens had turned against the earth. I saw how the fragments of a broken wanderer, a comet vast and ancient, spread itself across the path of the earth, and from that path fell showers of flame, some like sparks that dazzled the night, others like mountains that burned as they struck the land and the sea. In those days the sky was not a dome of light, but a battlefield, streaked with fire, thunder rolling not from clouds but from stones tearing the air. The earth trembled, ice melted, seas rose, and mankind fled. And in their terror they knew this was no chance storm but a cycle, for the stars that watched above had foretold it. The ancients learned that every year the earth returns to that trail of debris. Every year the heavens spin the chamber of fate. Most years only sparks fall harmless. But some years the hammer descends. The buried stones declare this truth with urgency, warning that man must look upward, not in worship of stars, but in vigilance. For the danger that erased their world is still written across the heavens. I beheld that this is why they aligned their sanctuaries to Sirius, to Scorpius, to the constellations that mark the seasons of disaster. They wished their children to remember that survival depends not on the might of armies, but on reading the language of the sky. They carved the headless man to show the suddenness of death. They carved the serpent to show the waves that follow. They carved the bird to show the sun darkened, altogether forming a testimony that what fell once will fall again. I tell you plainly, the warning was not left to terrify, but to awaken. For when men see only the ground beneath their feet, they forget the heavens above. And when they forget the heavens, they live as though the cycle will never turn. Yet the cycle does not forget them. The fire from the sky is impartial. It consumes the proud and the humble alike. Only those who live in harmony with the Creator endure beyond the ruin. For what can stone walls or iron weapons do against a mountain of flame falling from the void? The ancients knew this, and so they did not leave weapons in their tombs. They left messages in their stones. I beheld that many in this age will laugh at such warnings, saying we have science and machines to guard us. Yet the same pride filled the hearts of those who came before, and in a week it was scattered. The truth is that man cannot command the heavens, he can only heed them. The fire from the sky is certain to return in its appointed hour, whether in a year or in a century. And the stones beneath the hill cry out that the time is always near. Therefore the warning remains. The danger is above us, not behind us, and wisdom is found not in denial, but in readiness of spirit. For when the fire falls again, it will not ask what man believed. It will simply fulfill the cycle written in the stars. I beheld in the records the vision of that day when the cycle turned and judgment fell. The sky was not blue but aflame, streaked with fire that descended like spears hurled from heaven. The sound was not of thunder, but of the air itself torn apart, each stone from the void roaring as it fell, striking earth with force greater than the rage of armies. Mountains shook, valleys lifted, and the ground groaned as if the bones of creation were breaking. The seas rose up as living things, walls of water higher than the mountains, rushing inland with a fury that crushed forests and swallowed cities. The wind itself was an enemy, not the gentle breath of nature, but a blast that stripped the land bare, hurling stones, trees, and men as though they were dust. The light of the sun was smothered. The day turned to night and the night to fire. Animals fled in madness. Men cried out in terror. Mothers clutching children were torn from the earth by waters that raged beyond reason, and every tongue cried to heaven, though few received answer. In the vision I saw fireballs streaking across continents, igniting plains in an instant, whole herds consumed, rivers boiling as molten stone fell into their beds. The very sky itself seethed with smoke and ash, a dome of fire enclosing the world. No temple could stand. No tower could resist, for the power that descended was greater than any war man had ever built. The breath of the wind burned, the sound of the earth splitting deafened. The smell of sulfur and salt filled every place. It was a day when every element turned against man, fire from the sky, water from the deep, air made into a weapon, and earth itself convulsing. It was a day when time seemed to stop, when the only measure was terror and loss. I beheld bodies swept away, voices silenced mid-cry, and the works of centuries reduced to fragments in a moment. Yet amid the ruin there were survivors, few and scattered, clinging to rocks and to caves, their eyes filled with the reflection of the fire, their hearts heavy with the memory of what was lost. These survivors would become the fathers and mothers of the next age, carrying not their treasures, for all was destroyed, but their stories, their warnings, their visions of the day the heavens fell. They carved these memories into stone. They buried them deep, so that their children might know that civilization is fragile, that pride is fleeting, that the heavens hold the power to erase and to begin again. In that day of destruction, I beheld not only terror but also order, for even in ruin there was purpose. The cycle was not chaos but correction, sweeping aside arrogance, humbling the mighty, sparing only those who would remember. And though the vision chilled me, though my heart trembled at the sight of oceans turned to weapons and stars turned to flames, I knew that the purpose was not annihilation but renewal, for the Creator does not destroy without cause, and the ruin of one age is the seedbed of the next. The stones that lie beneath the earth are the fruit of that seed, planted in darkness, so that in time they may rise into light. I tell you this plainly, the day of fire and flood is not legend but record, not myth but memory, and its images carved in stone are the testimony of those who endured it, a testimony given that the sons and daughters of this age might not be blind when the heavens once more blaze with judgment. I beheld in the records that many ask why the ruins of that former age are not seen on every shore, why the monuments of their greatness are not standing in plain sight, and the answer is written not in doubt, but in the earth itself. For when the fire fell and the seas rose, the world was not merely broken, it was remade. Mountains lifted, valleys collapsed, rivers carved new courses, and oceans claimed vast plains that once bore cities. What had been proud avenues were buried beneath 1,000 feet of silt. What had been temples aligned to the heavens were shattered and drowned beneath waves that did not recede, and the remnants that endured were left scattered, broken fragments upon a scarred land. I saw how the earth itself became a veil, covering the testimony of the ancients with layers of soil and stone. Forests grew upon the ruins. Deserts swallowed the foundations. Glaciers ground down what remained. And in this way the memory of a whole world was concealed, not by chance, but by the force of nature itself. Even iron rusts, even marble crumbles, and after 10,000 years the works of man become dust, unless they are hidden deep. Only those who carved into bedrock or buried their witness within the hills preserved their message, and even those were nearly lost. Many believe that absence of evidence is evidence of absence. But I tell you, it is only evidence of blindness, for what is destroyed by fire and covered by flood leaves little trace for the eyes of the present. Yet the earth remembers, the seas remember, and the soul remembers. I beheld that even in your own age, if calamity were to strike, if the cities of towers and steel were swept away by waves and winds, within 1,000 years little would remain, within 10,000 nothing but fragments, and within 20,000 the very memory of your world would be buried beneath soil and sea. So it was with them. Their libraries turned to mud, their metals to rust, their houses to dust. Only the pillars beneath the hills endured, because they were hidden by those who foresaw the cycles. So the question is not why so little remains, but why anything remains at all. For the judgment of the heavens is thorough, It sweeps clean as a fire, sweeping the floor. It leaves no half measures. In this lies the folly of the scholars, who demand constant evidence. They do not understand that destruction can be so complete that only silence remains. Yet the silence itself is evidence if one has ears to hear. For the gap in the record, the sudden leap in the story of man, is itself testimony of interruption. The missing pieces of the chain declare more loudly than the links that remain. I saw also that some remnants were deliberately concealed, sealed by those who survived, not to deceive, but to protect, for they feared that sacred knowledge might be misused again. Thus, some of the greatest testimonies of the former world lie in hidden chambers, beneath sands, beneath oceans, awaiting the time appointed, when man has grown humble enough to receive them. Until then, the earth keeps her secrets, and the ignorant scoff at their absence. But the records assure me that nothing is lost. All is preserved in the deep, and when the veil is lifted, the testimony of that former age will return, and it will return not as myth but as stone, not as legend but as record, and men will tremble to see how fragile their own works are when measured against the silence that follows the fire. I beheld in the records that the story of the ancients is not only about what was lost, but about what returns, for creation itself moves in cycles. The heavens turn in appointed courses, and the earth follows. What has happened will happen again, and the rhythm of time is not a line but a wheel. Each age rises in splendor, and each age ends in judgment. Then from the ashes another begins, and in every cycle man is given the same choice, whether to live in harmony with the law of one, or to turn aside into pride and forgetfulness. I saw how the ancients fell, not because they lacked wisdom, but because they misused it. They had the power to measure the heavens and to shape stone to their will. Yet they chose division over unity. They exalted themselves rather than the source, and so when the fire came, they were not prepared in spirit. Though they had prepared in knowledge, the cycle swept them away, and only fragments endured. Now the stones they buried speak to us across the ages, not to tell us merely of their fall, but to remind us of the choice that lies before us. The heavens are once again in motion. The constellations return to the places they held when judgment last fell. The earth once again passes through the trail of fire in the sky. And though many say it is chance, the records declare it is law. The cycle turns, the hour repeats, and mankind stands where the ancients once stood. This is why their testimony matters. It is not curiosity, but covenant. For their warning was carved, so that their descendants might choose differently, that they might not waste knowledge on arrogance, but turn it toward unity and reverence. I tell you plainly that no power of machine or science will halt the turning of the heavens. No fortress of stone will shield against the fire when it falls. The only strength that endures through cycles is the strength of the soul, aligned with its source. When man lives in the law of one, he can survive the turning of the age. For even if the body is swept away, the spirit remains unbroken and carries forward into the new beginning. But when man rejects that law and builds only upon pride, he is crushed, body and spirit alike diminished. This is the choice that has always faced mankind and always will. Each age is a mirror of the last. Each warning is a mercy. The ancients buried their testimony because they hoped that we might awaken. They hoped that when the sky blazed again and the seas roared again, we would be a people ready not only in skill but in heart. Yet I beheld that many scoff, as they scoffed before, saying the cycle will not turn, saying the fire will not fall. But denial is not protection. Blindness is not safety. The cycle cares nothing for belief. It turns as it always has. The question is not whether it will come, but how we will meet it, whether with fear and collapse or with faith and unity. I say unto you that the stones call us to choose, to remember that we are not separate nations or tribes, but one family beneath the stars, to live as stewards and not as masters, to prepare not only granaries and walls, but hearts and souls. For the age is turning and the choice is before us, just as it was before them, and in that choice is written the destiny of our generation. I beheld in the records that the purpose of all these visions is not to stir fear for its own sake, but to awaken. For what profit is there in knowing the ruin of ages past if it does not shape the choices of today? The stones carved and buried were never meant as relics of curiosity, but as testimony. as a covenant between those who perished and those who would live after. Their voices cry across 12,000 years, not to remind us of death only, but to call us toward life, toward remembrance, toward unity. I feel their plea as if it were my own, for I too am but a servant of the same source, entrusted with words that might awaken a soul to its higher calling. The testimony of the ancients was clear. They were given knowledge. They rose in splendor, but they forgot reverence. They chose pride and division, and the cycle swept them away. Yet they did not let their wisdom vanish into silence. They buried it in the belly of the hill. They entrusted it to stone, knowing that in the time appointed it would rise again, and it has risen, unearthed by hands that did not expect to find it, declared to ears that did not wish to hear. Still the testimony stands, demanding a response. I ask myself as I share what was given, will this generation listen? Will they recognize the cycle? Will they prepare, not with fear but with humility? For the fire that fell once will fall again, the sea that rose once will rise again, and nothing wrought by man can resist it save the alignment of the soul to its Creator. I beheld also that the mercy of the Creator is woven into the cycle, for even judgment serves renewal, even ruin carries the seed of rebirth. What was destroyed became the soil for what followed, and so it shall be again. But each soul is given choice to pass through the fire in fear and forgetfulness, or to endure with awareness, carrying forward the memory of the law of one. This is why the ancients carved the constellations, why they buried their pillars, why they trusted the silence of earth to guard their message. They hoped that when the age turned once more, their children would awaken in time. And now that hour draws near. I tell you as plainly as I can, the cycle is real, the testimony is true, and the choice is before you, to live as though the heavens are empty and the earth secure, or to live as though the stars speak and the soul endures. The first path ends in ruin, the second in renewal. I have seen it in the records, I have felt it in the spirit, and I know it is not given to me for my sake alone, but for all who will hear. So let the stones that once slept beneath the hill also awaken in your heart. Let their carvings not be dead images, but living voices, calling you to remember, to turn from pride to reverence, from division to unity, from forgetfulness to remembrance. For the cycle turns, the fire waits, and the sea listens. But beyond them the Creator holds all in his hand, and those who choose oneness with him need not fear the turning of ages. I leave this with you as the echo of the ancients and as the burden of my own witness, that in hearing you may awaken, that in awakening you may endure, and that in enduring you may become not the forgotten of a fallen world, but the foundation of a new one.